And I think that also they're taking the experience that they had with a person who clearly has severe mental health issues and saying this applies to everyone when 90% of people that are experiencing issues with homelessness don't have that as a fact.
Yeah.
The world may not need another podcast, but it definitely could use a... Welcome to Slap the Power!
Our new show from the Slap Podcast Network that crosses artistry with advocacy through the universal power of music, comedy, movies, and beyond.
That's right. And on my right, you may recognize her from the voice. You might have, maybe, I don't know, been at Oxford when she got her fellowship there, or at Yale where she got her poli-sci degree there. You might be, I don't know, BB Rexa, the incomparable Maiya Sykes.
And you might recognize this amazing gentleman from his work as musician and bassist for the incomparable band currently on tour right now, Vintage Trouble, as well as the creator of the Slap Podcast Network. That is Mr. Rick Barrio Dill.
Gracias. Each episode of Slap the Power, we aim to fuse the unique essence of artists who advocate through their art and their story to try and raise awareness and resources for some of the most critical issues of our time.
Thank you for joining us once again on our two-part segment on the unhoused crisis, especially on its effects in Los Angeles. This is a really, really large topic. So Rick and I decided that we needed to get into this in a two-part episode. So welcome to part 2. And we are so grateful to have in our midst a homelessness advocate specifically specializing in youth homelessness and recruiting volunteers for a shared home space with us. We are so graciously honored to have Dr. Robin Petering, Ph.D. That is. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Petering.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. It is exciting. I know we've kind of talked about it for a while, but please tell for everybody that doesn't know, tell us kind of homelessness issue that obviously we're dealing with everywhere but here.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? So me, I have a PhD. I'm a social worker, actually. So I also have a master's of social work. My PhD is in social work. I started, when I was 22, I got my first job ever, kind of my first real job, right, out of college. And I ended up getting hired at a drop-in center in Eugene, Oregon. And so I was 22 and I was working up in Eugene with unhoused youth. It kind of like fell into it by accident. And I was a street outreach worker. So my job was literally to like go up and down the streets and like pass out fruit snacks to young people and then talk to them about the service center that we had down the road and like what they could get there and kind of just, invite them into the safe space. And that was, that's like 15, 16 years ago now. And that's just kind of, spiraled in a good way to led me down this really complicated path to today. But youth, one of the things I think that's an interesting fact is Los Angeles is actually like aging faster than any other city, right? So our average age continues to go up because it's such a hostile place for young people. Like it's hard. And as rent goes up and as wages remain stagnant, like it just becomes an impossible place for young people to live. And then imagine if you're a young person with a really little to no family support, abusive or toxic family support, no safety net, really. Like what?
Or on the fringe, being trans, being gay.
Oh, yeah. So young people, we really think about, I meet young people that are in and out of housing, right? It's not necessarily always, and youth homelessness is particularly hidden, we say, because you could be, going through like the Trader Joe's checkout line and the person like working there is actually sleeping in their car and all those things. Yeah. So
the face of what the unhoused has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And a lot of it
expanded.
I know that a lot of it is people who have jobs, people who live in two income situations and still can't afford housing. So I know that this is a very nuanced and complicated problem.
If we want to say what could someone do in the immediacy, to you is that, what would be the simplest thing from the inside that could help?
Yeah, the simplest thing I think is, like learning and asking these questions and kind of expanding your perspective, as well as, offering that to other folks. So I think that's one thing. And, understanding, like you were saying, like homelessness is a policy problem, right? It's not an individual. It's not an individual's fault, right? And I think also, that idea and that fact and that is more people would agree with that right now and are aware of that than has been ever, right? We can all kind of like agree, like the rent is too damn high.
Yeah.
And
getting higher.
And
socioeconomic issues, right?
And so, like, I think that's pretty easy for people to understand and kind of accept that. But on the flip side too, it's like those problems are really. So there's both the kind of, the upstream like prevention of like, how do we go to this root of this problem and prevent folks from even becoming homeless in the beginning, like, right? But then also right now there's, 50,000 people living outside and with some pretty serious, needs, in both, mental health, substance health, like really,
health is a big one.
We're talking about the age, that life expectancy on Skid Row is like 65, which is,
that's 15 years.
I was gonna say,
so like, living outside and living in Skid Row too, like, you're not guaranteed a long life.
Right. Or even a middle-aged life for some of these kids.
65 is like middle-age. Like at this point.
Well, and two, I want to get back to the, I've been looking just at what other overpopulated countries have been looking at as solutions, and I think that you touched upon one, which is the shared home space. So can you elaborate on what that is and how participants find a shared home space?
We had been working with a program. There was an idea in the youth homelessness called host homes. I think that's what you're referring to. And,
yes.
It is this idea that folks have like this resource. There are plenty of like empty bedrooms across the community, across the city. We have like empty nesters, folks that maybe I don't know, like young couples that don't have, kids that have decided not to have kids, or like, the guy in Venice with the Airbnb that he's kind of sick of like dealing with people. So that was kind of the idea is like, let's build a program to utilize these resources. And a lot of, the other thing that's missing too is that safety net, I would say. So like just a temporary stopgap, like for a place for someone to get a little bit of sense of stability before as they're finding a longer term solution. So that was the concept of a host home. Like there's a host and then you kind of get matched with a young person and you share space with them. It's not, it's also taking away from a little bit of that parental, it doesn't have like that parental relationship to it too. So gives the young person more autonomy and like they're young, but still like living their own lives. So that
I think it also takes away from I feel like one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with homelessness and the unhoused is stigma. And that stigma of, if I'm a young homeless person and I'm asking to share a space with you, I'm going to rob you.
Yeah.
And this, I think, takes some of that away and also takes that stigma away from this. This is an issue. And these kids are in this issue because they are lacking resources, not because they're criminals. So I feel like this also helps. I feel like the more we can do to not only decriminalize homelessness,
Yeah.
but also show that the face of it is not derogatory. It is not less than. It is just circumstance.
Yeah, and just really, exactly. With the host homes, that was one of the goals too, is to also be like a source of like advocacy and living, or living by example of like, there is many different situations and faces that experience homelessness, and so it's not always just exactly, everyone has a really like strong experience with, the people that live like right outside, right under the overpass by their house, right? And I often see like a lot of, when you see really nasty things like that people say on Nextdoor or whatever, it's usually like someone having an unpleasant or a bad experience, but they like take that experience and really just put it onto everyone. Right. Yeah.
And I think that also they're taking the experience that they had with a person who clearly has severe mental health issues and saying this applies to everyone when 90% of people that are experiencing issues with homelessness don't have that as a factor.
Yeah,
I feel like there are situations too where, because on the just even on the mental health side of things, I feel like that's where you almost need professionals, or there needs to be almost like a triage situation, like you said, because so much of this is, you can tell this person is gone, removed from reality because of a mental health issue, and so in fairness, we're not on the same plane. And you're trying to have empathy for that, but you need the resources and the place to be able to do it, and that's where I feel like I get hung up. Is the focus coming for resources on having that triage area, on having a place where mental health is at the forefront? It's not criminal, and it's definitely not, it's less and less economic, because I feel like we've got some of that managed, but where's the hang up?
I mean, it's still like the scope is, so we just are not, we simultaneously have more resources going to address this issue on like all of this, but then we also just, there's just not enough at all. And the mental health thing, that's the one thing, right? We're building housing. There's a lot of different housing options kind of now with like hotels kind of being open. That was like a COVID like positive, I would say, is the ability, like people learned how to turn hotels into both short-term and long-term housing. But the mental health in California, this is like kind of like comes down from Newsom and above. It just like is not there. Like
it's so neglected.
It's so neglected.
It feels like it should be the most important thing, and you can just, if you can't see it or hear it, you can definitely feel it. That's we need to address that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I have a friend, like my good friend, and she was recently had an episode, or like had an issue where she really needed some mental health support, and went into the ER, and they're like, it's full. Like, and you have to, we don't have anything
We don't have anything for you. Yeah, that happened to a friend of mine too. And in the case of people of color, this is even worse. Like my sister actually suffered from postpartum after her last child, and she said, I need some help. I'm feeling mentally taxed. I'm feeling mentally exhausted. I just need some help. And they committed her.
Wow.
Whoa.
And we had to do all this other stuff to like literally get her out of being committed.
Wow.
Like they literally, because she went in because she was she's a Medi-Cal recipient. She's 5 children. She was just like, I'm taxed. I'm overworked. I'm tired. I'm feeling mentally exhausted. I just need some help. I just need some, and that's literally what she came in and saying. And their response was committing her. And of people of color, we are 8 times less likely to be seen for mental health issues. So when you're looking at these disparities, especially amongst the unhoused communities, you're looking at an 8-to-1 ratio of people with mental health issues that are also people of color. These are really, really large numbers. And it used to be that the face of your homelessness was just in Skid Row, but now it's down the street. It's around your house, and people are reacting in, I think, very conservative ways out of fear because now it's in your backyard. But it's in your backyard for really specific reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, one of the things that is really hard and difficult, I think, for me and as well as everyone is, this is it's going to solve this problem. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's going to take time. So often, we're living in, the space of like the quick fix, right? It's like, I don't want to see it.
Right.
I don't,
Or deal with it. So
that's the NIMBYism. But but I guess if steering it back to the children and to youth, your specialty is, from COVID, I heard we lost like a whole group of kids that were already, unhoused during COVID. And then now, like you said, it's going to take it'll take a long time, but we have kids that probably don't have the time and
they have some I don't know, it's not a stat or not, but like, it's the first 72 hours on the street. If you can interrupt that, it's like once you pass that 72 hours, like your risk for having chronic or long-term homelessness really like exceeds, right? And I think that's one of the things when I talk about ending youth homelessness, we're like, it's not necessarily that we want it. I mean, we don't think that we can end it, but like make it as brief and rare as possible.
And disrupt the pattern is what it seems like you're going for.
Try to prevent, like you were saying. Yeah.
In some like European, like I think England, and I would probably butcher this, but like in England, they have like systems of like opening up. The host home concept is actually really why like throughout England, but they do it in kind of a short-term temporary emergency stay. So imagine like a young person is kicked out of their house and you're just like, okay, you can stay with me for 5 days. Like, and they have people throughout the country that open up their house in that way. And they call it like the night mission or something like that. But I think that's like a fantastic concept, but just like the expanding they're really just like, we don't want this. We want to end this. Like it's a high priority to make sure that a young person doesn't fall into like the longer term homelessness.
And shouldn't it be a high priority? I mean,
my company, we do the homeless count, or we do the youth homeless count. So we coordinate the whole thing, and that's part of our like research aspect of the side of my company, Lensco. But last year was the first homeless count. Are you guys aware of the homeless count? Like,
yes.
Yeah, they do it. It's required by the federal government. So,
but elaborate on it for those that don't know. That'd be great, actually. So,
it's required if you are a city or entity, or they call that wants money from the federal government, from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department. You need to count. It sounds so like silly. Count how many people are unhoused, like in your community, right? So these numbers, they do these across the country, and then those numbers kind of decide how that money is distributed, right? So it's like, the
federal money,
federal money, and then state money, and everything kind of falls into that aspect. Like the numbers that we find here in LA. It determines how much money goes to South LA versus the beach versus Lancaster, right? So even that, but it's a requirement, and so we in LA we do it every year. You're not required to do it every year; you can do it every other year. But we have a couple of nights where literally like thousands of people actually like walk up and down every street in Los Angeles and like tally. Literally, like when you have a tally sheet, right? And not everywhere, very like canvassing every street.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah, and like
and this goes county by counties, and it just depends on the county's allocation of who does it. So not every county even does it. So you have a gross underrepresented number.
Yeah, it's always when I see those numbers, you're always kind of like, this is like the low end of the. the whatever spectrum or what the error margin. But still, right now, Los Angeles, we have some of the highest. Like New York, Los Angeles, and Seattle are kind of the top players in this.
It's interesting because one of those three places got rid of all the shitty seasons, and if you were going to do it, I feel like the other two, Seattle, it feels like that would not. New
York is different because they have a right to shelter policy. So actually,
legal.
they have. There's more people that are experiencing homelessness, but they're actually more inside. They're all sheltered.
There's more solutions.
Yeah, except the right to shelter.
Not that great.
It's a right to shelter. It's not a right to housing. So that's like the key. So they've built a $3 billion shelter like industry essentially, and are kind of trapped in that cycle because of that policy.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. But so the homeless count, we did the first one since COVID, and the numbers came out last summer or something like that. And everyone's like, what is gonna what are the numbers gonna be? And and the expectation was that they were gonna be higher because homelessness has become more visible, right, than it ever has before. But the numbers actually kind of flatlined. So there were the same number of people experiencing homelessness counted as there were prior to COVID. And
I feel like the tell-all is going to be by next year.
Yeah. See, exactly. You're right.
But I feel like people don't know that.
Yeah.
And people are, you hear the statistics and think, oh, it should have risen because now I see it more. It's more prevalent in my neighborhood. But I'm like, no, you just see it more because there wasn't access to certain things. So they had to just fan out. But now you're going to really see it because of the moratoriums on rent. It out that a lot of people are diverting their resources that they'd normally spend on food now to housing. So many households are spending more than 50% of their resources simply to be housed, which has never really happened before.
Technically, like Twin Towers downtown. Yeah. So it has the most people in one spot that are, have severe mental health issues, which is the jail here in Los Angeles. So and then if you're having a mental health crisis, the first responder to that is often police. Like there is no.
I think that back in the day, there used to be more training in a community-based organization way so that people had more training to community resistance solutions. And part of that included mental health. But now, since we're under-training these people and just sending them out into areas that they have no idea about, they don't want to because they see this as tantamount to a safety issue. And I think that this safety issue could be grossly combated by more training, but that would mean more resources to these people to be allocated directly to. I think that the issue is we're giving money to the police, but not allocating those resources to actually make better police people is the issue to me. And if we gave them more training and actually allowed them to know about the communities we were asking them to police, A, that'd be a thing. B, if you increase their salaries, the money is not translating to the foot people, right?
Yeah.
So these people can't afford to live in the areas you're asking them to police, so they don't know anything about them.
The police force does not live in Los Angeles.
They don't live there. They usually live in Riverside or Lancaster because they literally cannot afford to live in the areas, even the low income areas that they're being asked to police because the rents are and the mortgages are so high. Even people who are coming from, outside counties cannot afford to buy in that area. So it seems like, it really comes down to pricing. And how do we combat pricing? Because that seems like a policy issue. So where do we lie in affecting the policy change for things like that? What has your company looked at in ways to affect those kinds of changes? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think going back to the mental health responders and, hiring a social worker or whatever, it unfortunately is cheaper than per hour than a law enforcement agent.
But even just hiring a social worker to train, certain sectors or
the police force?
be a liaison to a police. Seems like it would almost
Just
be a
having
workable
infusing
solution.
more community.
I feel like that was the argument. That was the argument that got lost in the quote unquote defund the police.
I think
right?
because they called it defunding the police, people threw the baby out with the bathwater.
They thought, you think that's zero. No, it just meant that we could sort of reallocate these funds and not ask the police to do so many jobs. You can't be,
the traffic responder,
you can't
and the mental health responder.
And the mental, exactly. And so.
The domestic dispute, negotiator, that stuff. But I think that the things that, one of the things that I've really been interested in the last bit in looking at the system and why it isn't working and how it's so hard is wages for so I've said this on record a bunch of places, but we keep putting all this money into homelessness, into housing and all this stuff, but we've not invested any money in the people that actually run those programs. So your average case manager down on Skid Row, their salary is about $45,000, and talk about people that can't afford. So you have folks that are working in these places that are also at risk of,
and going to the same food banks because they have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we saw in COVID is people, it's, the wages are bad and not the living wage in Los Angeles, and the work is really hard, right? It's it's a very, very hard. So we get tons of burnout. And then I think we saw during COVID, people are I don't want to do it anymore.
And also, you don't care if I do it, so I'm not going to do it, and then maybe you'll care. And everybody was like, oh my God, it takes such a long time to get a burrito at the airport. Meow, 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 or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so we have right now, I think, Rand just came out with a study that about, and I haven't read it all. I knew it was happening, and I've been talking about this forever. But that people that work in the homeless sector are just severely underpaid and unhappy, and we have a serious wage force issue, it's just most of the nonprofits that I work with have 20 to 30 open positions. They said there's. I was in a meeting the other day, they said there's 2,000 empty positions right now in the homelessness sector across Los Angeles.
But because those jobs aren't paying a livable wage.
They're not paying. And people are,
and require a lot of education to fill.
And we have a nonprofit, and they're trying to hire a therapist and people are I don't want to do it if I can't do Zoom. Because they're gotten used to that and stuff like that. So things have significantly changed in the workforce, and that has,
these areas are severely underserved because these positions.
We have a nonprofit, and they're trying to hire a therapist and people are I don't want to do it if I can't do Zoom. Because they're gotten used to that and stuff like that. So things have significantly changed in the workforce, and we are at a place where I think it's all going to fall apart if we don't really seriously address that.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
And that has,
these areas are severely underserved because these positions are severely underpaid to begin with.
And they're undervalued, I think.
Severely undervalued, clearly.
I feel like if we removed the money out of the politics, running for politics, to your point earlier, that you're constantly running. If you were able to remove that out of, what could we do with that money if we removed it out of politics? And if it was,
if you see how much money gets dumped into consultant fees.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you're not many. What Rick Caruso and his he spent $100 million,
$100 million, $110 million, something like that.
Just gone.
And I was like, my problem with that, and too, because he tried to put homelessness in his thing, and I was like, well, you kind of, I'm not saying you helped create it, but you definitely exacerbated it by a lot.
Yeah.
And if you maybe put some of that money into, for as many facilities as you own, if you had one sector in every urban area that was specifically designed for just the youth unhoused, maybe I'd take you seriously.
Exactly.
But when he was just my platform is homelessness, I was like, skirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? You know?
Builds
And
a
I've
great
worked
mall.
for the man.
Yeah,
And I've
yeah.
worked for the man. You know,
Yeah.
he built a
Yeah.
great mall and he hired me for a great concert. But I just remember being like, you did who?
Too. Who knows? He didn't. I don't even think he really lived in LA. But
I think he lives in Santa Barbara most of the time.
yeah, totally. But taking money out of politics would be great.
No, sure.
Being able to take, because I
Yeah.
feel like that'd be blocked so easily, because the reason why politics is where it's at is because it's able to be bought, and we're really
Yeah.
an oligarch that's run by the
right.
richest
That's
few.
Yep.
Over the top. And with that almost being something that we just have to bake into the equation now, that's another reason why as artists we're so driven to kind of to put this together, is I feel like at a certain time language doesn't do the trick. You know, it's almost like we've gotten to the place where increasing awareness and changing what the face looks like to people instead of getting it on Nextdoor. It almost feels like the vehicle to deliver that is going to be, or has always been, but it just feels like it's more art now than ever. And I wonder, is there something that, of what you are working on right now the most, is there kind of like an angle where you see the ability of artists or people that have high profiles to be able to lift this up in a way that can actually help move the needle?
Yeah, yeah, that's a big question. But yeah, I mean, I think, raising the awarenesses. But yeah, we, at least in our youth platform, right, we have a couple of things that we highlight, and one also is like involving lived experience, so uplifting the voices of people that are experiencing homelessness or have experienced homelessness, and bringing them into the decision making and like power positions in this sector. My company, we have 4 formerly unhoused youth that are on full-time staff that are hired strictly for advocacy positions. It's really cool. It's like,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's new, and it's like we're kind of on the forefront of what that looks like, and it's challenging as well. But it also really has significantly changed the work, like in a positive way.
And how can our listeners be directly involved with your company? I know your company,
Yeah.
Lensco, is working in this really, really specific way. Are donations best? Sponsorship? Like, what are the ways that just our listeners could get involved here?
Yeah, sure. So we help coordinate the Los Angeles Coalition to End Youth Homelessness. And we're currently working on, a campaign that's both, promoting resources and policy changes, and we're kind of building our own little like awareness thing. So that is, we call it Young People to the Front, right? So bringing young people to the front. We kind of, I like that name because it doesn't include the word homeless in it, and it's more about
I love
impact.
that.
Yeah.
It's not kind of like highlighting that experience, but it's just really elevating, like we need to be considering and bringing young people like at the front of these policy lines. I always say this too. Ending youth homelessness, right? So there's 60,000 people experiencing homelessness today in Los Angeles, but 10% of that or less are youth. So we have a lot of young people that are experiencing homelessness, but in the overall aspect of it, there's like, a couple thousand, like between 5,000 to 6,000 young people at one time. And like, it's totally possible to, help those 6,000 people, right?
Sure.
It's a doable goal.
It's a workable number.
Yeah. And that is a huge thing in preventing chronic long-term homeless. I have another stat that we need better information on this, but it's hard to get it. But 1 in 5 people that are in permanent supportive housing, so have been like taken out of the system, had their first experience of homeless before the age of 25. So like, imagine just like, if we were able to focus on that, we could, cut the homelessness crisis by 1/5, if not more, right?
A
or at
large
1
margin.
Yeah. Sure. So it's like, thinking about that in that way of like really kind of shifting our framework of like the prevention. So we have Young People to the Front. We have a website, youngpeopletothefront.org.
And we'll have that in our show notes, so don't be worried.
Yeah. And we're actually launching our own podcast.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Our first episode comes out tomorrow.
That's
so,
awesome.
It's the Young People to the Front podcast. Yeah.
Yes.
And,
young people, get to the front.
Yes.
It's hosted and kind of produced by two of my staff members, or all of my staff members. But it's gonna be fun. So folks, give that a listen.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll have to do. We'll do some crossover.
We'll do some cross pollination.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really appreciate the work you're doing, and we'll have to talk about that crossover episode.
Yeah.
Get the kids.
Yeah.
Get them on
exactly. We have a lot to learn.
And Dr. Petering, where can we find you? What are your socials?
Gosh. I am on Twitter at Robin Petering. That's kind of the big one.
Cool.
But yeah, my organization has an Instagram. We have a Young People to the Front Instagram. I think it's just at Young People to the Front, and lensco.la. That's what we
Okay, and we'll have all those in our show notes, because we like to be a one-stop shop.
Cool,
so when people listen,
and then
you
can find my email probably pretty easily, and I'm accessible that way.
Okay, we'll put that in our show notes as well.
Amazing.
Thank you again so much for stopping by.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yay! Every week when we chop up real issues from a local and global perspective and cross with how as artists we can make a difference by banding together in small but massive ways.
That's right. Add us on socials at Slap the Power, and make sure to sign up for free at slapthepower.com, where you can get special offers and free information, as well as find out about all the other great shows we have coming online at Slap the Network.
Please do yo girl a favor.
That's right.
And write a review, share, and subscribe, so you will automatically be a part of the Slap family.
That's right. And as always, if you want to know how you can affect change yourself in issues that matter to so many, make sure to go to votesaveamerica.com, or you can get there through our site, slapthepower.com.
Now go slap some love into that day.
That's right.
See you next show.